the 31st of July, the very last day. In with a heat wave, out with a heat wave. Hope everybody's doing good on this Sunday night. It's hard to do good, I know, when we have nuclear on our planet with us. Hopefully the future generation won't have to suffer the humiliation of having nuclear power plants on their planet. Did you know Fukushima is like eating a banana and walking in the sunshine and flying on an airplane? If you didn't, then you don't read media or watch TV or see movies on Hollywood, because that's what they've been telling you for 80-something years. And they laugh about it too. The children are constantly updated with those connotations. And the head of the snake, actually snakes are cool compared to these scumbags, is the International Atomic Energy Agency. Has been on a prolific campaign of disinformation for its entire legacy. It was created in the ashes of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Study finds giant strontium-90 release into the ocean and water begins about 1,000 days. This is a bone seeker, by the way, of all species, not just self-centered humans. And after about 10,000, or it peaks for, so basically what it means is for every iodine or cesium-137, there's 100 times strontium-90. It's a nasty isotope. It's hard to avoid it. This model is only a partial model based on 20 days of emissions from Japan. Guess what? You know, did you know that coal, oil, and gas don't make emissions like this? The factories or anything else, that emission only travels 20, 40, 50, 100 miles on a windy day. If you don't build those things in your community, you never would have had a problem with them. It was done on purpose so they can... the industry, you got to give them credit for how devious they are. It's only because they're such cowards that they're so deviant, right? That's obviously... There's 1,000 types of fission products you got to worry about, not just cesium. Anybody that talks about cesium-137... and iodine-131 after an accident are not your friends or anybody else on this planet friends, or their children's friends, or the animals' friends. Geothermal has been around forever, so you don't have to break through the barrier. You just got to get down to a certain depth, allegedly. And there's a lot of controversies because there's mines that are a mile deep, right? But generally, you're going to go down to the earth and tap into the energy. And so this company has quasi-energy, figures they can use X-rays to atomize the rocks that are difficult to drill through, deep enough that they can tap into geothermal at over 900 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures. This is actually hotter than gas, oil, and coal plants are. So you can take the gas, oil, and coal fuel away from the plant and just power the same plant with geothermal. And that if we wanted to, we can retroactive all existing power plants starting immediately. All the universities were asked to conquer any issues. We can implement this in about 3 or 4 or 5 years worldwide. There's no patent on it. Anybody can do it. And you can power the entire planet in less than 5 years. With a continuous source. You never have to bring fuel to the site again. There's no adverse emissions. And Canada lifted restrictions on Japanese food imports on June 14, 2011. June the 14th, 2011. This was 93 days after the nuclear meltdown started. So at about that point, the plume was still brutally coming across the ocean. This model is based on 16 days. 16 days. So imagine how bad the food is going to be from the prefecture that done that. And so gas, oil, and coal don't have dozens of daughters of curium and americium and cesium and uranium and plutonium, and the list goes on and on and on and on. So we had 2 hours and 3 seconds was my last video. Strange thing about my site is now it's 2 hours and 11 seconds long. And so after 12 hours, my videos get longer. But I noticed that nobody else's videos do. France orders air-conditioned shops to close their doors with fines if they leave them open. And France, of course, is the world's biggest sucker for nuclear. France gets its uranium from Niger. Niger is the same country where France has a standing army, and has brought in weapons and destroyed the country from the inside with civil wars and armed fractions on the borders, so they can't maintain the borders, to cause complete government breakdown in the country. And they've done that for over 60 years now, so they can get cheap, high-grade uranium. Just millions and millions of refugees, millions dead, so they can get their hands on cheap uranium, still happening today. You know, they also poisoned every human and animal and insect and bird and mammal that goes past even today the French Polynesian islands. And to put that in perspective, they were doing the same thing as America was doing at the Bikini Atolls, which is now, in 2019 studies, showed over 1 million square kilometers is permanently radioactive. And what that means is you can't take your children or yourself or your friends or your families or your loved ones to these unimaginable, beautiful, very rare paradises out in the middle of the terrible ocean. There are these unique paradise. Your nuclear countries destroyed every one of them worldwide. And they destroyed it permanently. Some of it they just atomized on top of that. Islands I'm talking about. The most unique, wonderful things on this planet. That's the last place you want to shipwreck, unfortunately. So France has 30 reactors shut down and 26 left running, I think. Because of corrosion. The government built this, so you know these were going to break. They all broke at the same time. The ones that are currently running has the same flaw, but it's better to poison the whole country than it is to give nuclear black eyes, what we see throughout history. The French government is set to force air conditioning shops. Why not just close the military down for a little while? They're the biggest user of resources. It makes more sense than making the people suffer. They already suffer enough. 70% of the water goes to nuclear. Now they can't have any water or air conditioning because of nuclear. And they're the biggest polluters on the planet for the whole legacy. And some people had left their doors open of their businesses with their air conditioning on. And the energy minister uses that now as just a big distraction, as if everybody's leaving their doors open or something. A ban on illuminated advertising between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. currently applies in towns and cities with less than 800,000 people. So if you got less than 800,000 people, they would make it applicable no matter the size of the population. So they're going to punish the big cities finally. The crazy batshit lunatic, excuse the language, President Emmanuel Macron's Citizens Climate Convention. This is a weapon. Whenever you hear these climate organizations with the government, these are weapons, right? Had proposed even more ambitious curbs on light pollution. What's wrong with that? And electricity use, including banning all video advertising screens in public spaces, public transport, and these ideas were ultimately rejected by the people who own you. The town with the cleanest air in the world is a government town in the middle of nowhere. Endless resources. Close that waste of money down. That's a waste of money. You know how much resources it takes to run this place for government, who leave all their doors open, unlocked because of polar bears. Unfortunately, there's no statistics, so we can't enjoy some relief from it, but this is interesting. 10 days after the Fukushima nuclear power plant accident in 2011, that's not an accident, that was an event, that was an extinction level event. Radionuclides produced by the plant's fission reactors, because they want to separate it from fusion now desperately, because they're trying to give fusion a pretty name. The tritiated water from a fusion plant is unbelievable. You can't possibly contain it or store it. There's so much of it. Well, you could, but you'll run out of space on Earth pretty quick if you do. Were detected in the atmosphere. So Fukushima fallout was detected. Really? Anybody surprised about this? Will be carried thousands of miles to the atmosphere in just a few days. It's very rare for them to acknowledge stuff like that. That's the only reason we're talking about it. Look at the laser on these carbon-intensive government facilities in the middle of nowhere that we can do without. Come up with solutions for pressing problems. Don't get your little toys. Communities have a rule: no one can lock the doors. And if you see a polar bear chasing the government worker and you don't lock your door, you're a terrible person. The former chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission of India spoke of the country's nuclear energy plans and people's fear of accidents and radioactive leaks. He's not a very respectable person, let's put it this way. Atomic energy is cheaper than solar and wind. It's carbon-free. Too cheap to meter, Dana. Have a nice day. Please come back. Wind for end consumer, says nuclear. He's not a nuclear scientist. He was with the Atomic Energy Commission. You stop being human the minute that you can't get the job with them unless you're missing some serious chromosomes. Nuclear energy might be capital intensive, the most expensive thing on the planet, the most carbon intensive too. But the cost to the consumer is much lower than that of renewables. I apologize. I don't write this stuff. Don't get mad at me. Like solar and wind. Nuclear scientist and former chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission of India. So he's claiming that it's cheaper, less emissions than solar or wind. You can barely keep up with the lies, can you? Like if someone stuck a sewing needle into me every time I read one of their lies for a week, I'd probably be dead at the end of the week, right? I'd definitely be screaming a lot. Although nobody can say no accident will take place, the anti-humans said that if there's an accident, reactors are now designed to prevent the radiation from leaking out. First off, kooky, wacko, they're high-pressure reactors. They're over 1,000 up to 2,000 plus pounds per square inch. Once the pressure starts coming out of these places, you can't stop any of the current reactors on the planet from melting down. You can't do it, right? It's not a law, it's a whopper. But that's nuclear. And don't wait for any academics or universities to come out and correct them. That would never happen. That's where he learned it. There's no incentive not to be evil in the nuclear industry. Try to wrap your mind around that. Well, we got a poll tonight. A poll here. Got a poll there, poll everywhere. Poll. Is putting nuclear dumps under the ocean exceptionally evil? The interesting thing about this, and we got 31 votes, a resounding 97% said, yeah, and that's exceptionally evil. The interesting thing about it is they don't tell you why they got to put it under the ocean rather than under the ground somewhere, right? No, we got to put it under the ocean. Yeah, but why? Well, because we got to. But why? Same reason we build these things over aquifers, surrounded by farms, because we love you so much. Saskatchewan uranium exploration energized by carbon-free power push. I'm sorry, I didn't write this. Don't get mad at me. Saskatchewan, unfortunately, is Canada, so it's even more humiliating because I'm from Canada. Energized by carbon-free power push. Woo! We're the most carbon-intensive thing on the planet, but hey, shh! Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. Tell them this. It's almost like I want to put antidepressant on my microphone cover so I can lick it once in a while I'm doing this, because I start to go a little crazy, right? The world's second largest source of carbon-free power. Don't get mad at me. I didn't write it, okay? Just saying. Lying seems to be that's what they do. Right? It must be really weird in their schools and that, where they all got to tell a lie all the time. You told the truth. Get out. You failed. Experts note nuclear is also one of the cleanest sources of energy. What expert was that? Experts also says you're full of, leaky stuff. Savory investors have been positioning themselves to participate in re-energized uranium sector. Oh, that's what this is all about, right? Trying to suck the investors in. Uranium now is up to $56. The miners need 60. And of course, everything that was before inflation went nutty in February, and it was then pre-inflation worldwide, because this is what that'll be remembered as, right? Where inflation finally went nuts. This was orchestrated, obviously, right? Locked you up in your house for 2 years and then inflated everything to 4 times the normal prices. Savory investors have been positioning themselves to participate in re-energized uranium sector. These are demons, eh? Camco, now, in 2018 it was $22. Sprout Investments in Ontario bought up $1 billion plus worth of pure uranium. So you had to start the mining again, see? And then they tricked the investors into buying into it, because The bottom fell out of it 2 weeks later. So they done it again. The investors had lost all their money, cashed out. They bought it up back and then done it again. They've been doing this for 11 years since Fukushima melted down. They'll artificially inflate it. They'll get the investors come in. They'll throw their whole pension on it. Bottom falls out 2 weeks later. The pensioners do what they're supposed to do and panic, and they sell it for dirt cheap. The same people who just sold it buys it back for dirt cheap, and then they do it again 2 weeks later. The Globe and Mail's been pushing it for over 11 years, 3 times a week, pumping uranium stocks with that routine. They're making just a fortune off every little jump. Now they hit $58 per pound, so it used to be $60 for a mine to be profitable. And that's not a big profit, that's just you paid your bills, right? But Camco just hired 650 people for their new uranium mine. It's a lot of money to fire up these things. And so they're serious, and they need a lot of propaganda now to justify to the investors, see? Because it's a Sprout Physical Uranium Trust. The word trust and sprout shouldn't be in the same sentence. It should be 100% illegal. Actual crime to put those two words in the same sentence. They're hideous. There's one thing we can count on with the nuclear industry, and unfortunately there's a million companies dependent upon it. But one thing we can count for sure is they're hideously evil, insidiously hateful of all species, particularly humans. Sprouts noted that nuclear energy is one of the cleanest energy sources. Here we go again. Based on CO2 emissions. This is absurdness. Every nuclear power plant needs its own 2 external power supplies. Gas, oil, or coal plants dedicated to it. And the emissions just from the mining are staggering. It's staggering. Mining is so intensive, because coal, you're just digging it out of the ground, right? Uranium, you got to break it down with football fields of chemicals. All of that, by the way, when it's used, is evaporated into the environment because it's such a carbon-free environment. They get rid of everything they can that way. They recycle radioactive material into children's toys, for goodness sakes. Greater demand for uranium in the future. That's highly unlikely. First off, the so-called small modular reactors, aka the crazies, are not going to be using new fuel. They want mixed oxide fuel because it has more energy. It's illegal to make it in Canada, the United States, because it's insidiously polluting, right? Nuclear emissions are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And so mixed oxide fuel, the small modular reactors, are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison, according to the government. The government also says this is up and that's down, so who knows for sure. Uranium is key to 20% of the U.S. power supply. All the reactors in America are brittle, fragile, high-pressure reactors. Are nuclear dump sites on top of that. The fuel pools are all hemorrhaging isotopes into the environment 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Through the fuel pools, they're still splitting the atoms worldwide. It's a death sentence for our planet, see? If you just took the fuel pools if you found another planet in the solar system, and it was just like Earth, except it didn't have nuclear, and you brought a couple of fuel pools there, eventually the emissions from the fuel pools would kill all the species on the planet. It could take a couple of 100 years or something, right? But 100% will happen. Oh, so uranium is the key to 20% of the U.S. power supply and multiple defense needs, right? So power plants are nobody's friend, including the nuclear industry. That's why they got them surrounded by farms, is because they're such nice people. It's the strangest thing imaginable, really. Why would you surround a power plant with farms, right? What kind of sickness that all nuclear power plants, right? The majority of nuclear power plants are surrounded with, the bigger the picture, the higher up the picture looking, the more farms you're going to see. It's just a coincidence, Dan, that all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. And the farm food is shipped to the local supermarkets and supermarkets worldwide. Industry observers attribute the recent increase in the price of uranium to the fact that major producers faced an oversupply market caused by Fukushima meltdown and agreed to work together to turn the market around. Well, they faced an oversupply because a lot of countries start turning away from nuclear immediately, of course, Japan included, shut down 54 reactors. That's a significant amount, right? A lot of reactors worldwide are run at lower speeds because they're fragile, very brittle from neutron bombardments, well past their... The majority of the reactors on the planet are well past their lifespan. On top of that, these are planet disasters. Agreed to work to turn the market around. Again, they scammed the whole planet non-stop for 11 years. We covered it. There's part of it right there. Energy energized by the carbon-free power. Oh, yeah. Every once in a while, I like to roll out this little bit here. Now, the first two names you're probably going to recognize if you're hardcore, and a lot of you are. If you're here and you've been here for the whole show this far, you're officially hardcore. Rod Adams. Looks like a normal, everyday human, believe it or not. But he's a sadistic, sickening, hateful demon on our planet. Bless his little heart, demonic heart. He's one of the most prolific lawyers, too. And Wade Allison from... he's retired, obviously, emeritus professor. The University of Oxford, and what a lawyer that guy is, something else. I'd done a couple of videos just for Wade Allison only, and his students, of course. I encouraged him to sue the university, get their money back, and go get a real education. Atomic Insight and Wade Allison. That's not a very good... so this is Scientists for Accurate Radiation Information. There's... let me see if I can find them. They're strange creatures, I tell you something. I can't always find the video because I don't use it all the time. Looks like tonight is one of them, I suppose. It doesn't matter. If I can find the video, it'd be helpful. Yeah, I don't know what I got done with it. Top of my head. Oh. I'll put a lot of videos in a standby place, a go-to place, lately, the last couple of years. Look what we got. He's part of the he's a journalist, I think, for Accurate Radiation Information. Okay, so there's two people on the stage that are doing a presentation on the dangers of radiation in communities that the government wishes to reopen. And if you do a public engagement, quite a lot of people like this person here are going to show up. We'll just play this little clip.
Kushida, freelance writer for UK Fuji, and I'm a generous member of the Scientists for Accurate Radiation Information. I'm pro-nuclear power generation. Restart of the nuclear plants are much more beneficial than worrying too much about the fact-finding or the...
This is a journalist saying he's pro-nuclear and there shouldn't be fact-finding. It's just bizarre. Let's play the last piece one time.
Yeah, nuclear plants are much more beneficial than worrying too much about...
Nuclear power plants are much more beneficial than too much worrying about fact-finding.
The fact-finding or...
That's scary stuff. Jim Conker, we see him on Forbes, to the point where I won't read Forbes anymore because, Michael Schellenberg also posted. I do, right? But I've went to war against Conker a few times. He usually goes by the name of James, not Jim. And he's a dirty bomb specialist, he claims. He does instruction classes for police and first responders. Can you imagine someone like him doing that? It's just frightening because it's 100%. He makes a living by lying, and very dangerous lies, right? Loveless Respiratory Research Institute. They kill an awful lot of beagle dogs and beagle puppies, for instance. Many animals, right? But they're the military-industrial complex too. Loveless, not Lovelace, but it should be Loveless, right? I always call it Loveless Respiratory Research. So Dr. Raymond Gilmedy, I got 98 studies of him doing studies on beagle dogs and beagle puppies. It's really shocking. Okay, and so citizens, these are professional lawyers. One thing we can assure you of. These are the professional go-to public lawyers. Rod Adams and Wade Allison are just a fraction of them. But when you see these people, you can see Department of Labor's, the universities, Sandina, cancer centers. That's frightening. The people that work in cancer centers are out there creating propaganda publicly. That's frightening because the propaganda is so dangerous. And then it's not a crime to do this to you, right? It's not a crime to poison you with radiation either, see? In fact, Congress and parliaments worldwide don't have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with radiation. No, only the non-regulatory commission has that distinction, and trust me, they're not making it illegal. They're the ones that are telling you it's harmless. It's very humbling, though, to see all these universities, academics, Australian Nuclear Science Technology Organization. These are all the go-to for your medias, by the way. Your medias use all these same people, and their job is to come out and tell you a big, fat, hateful lie. And that's not the picture I was looking for, but I copy that one. That's their job right there, look. Well, you know, they're from the Children's Hospital. Dana, why would they lie, right? Can you imagine how evil you are? You're out there lying, but you also work at a children's hospital. It's surreal, isn't it? The Ben Gurion University is Israel, if I remember correctly, isn't it? Los Alamos National Laboratory. Well, we expect that from these types of people, see? That's the whole problem now, right? You expect... if your university is doing a presentation on nuclear or nuclear waste or something like that, these are the people that are going to show up. That's the experts they're going to call in. All of these. These are expert lawyers. Their job is to come and lie to you. But look at the mix of them from the different facilities. Obviously, we can't. I guess we can because I'm in charge of the clicking. University of Saskatchewan, Canada, Sandia National Laboratory, executive for the Nuclear Energy Consultants, Waste Isolation Pilot Plant. Well, isn't that reassuring? Don't that give a lot of confidence? Seeing all these professional PhDs, BS and MAs coming out of here. That's to get the education, to get the job, to tell the lie. Try wrapping your mind around that. Did your teacher in school give you a job with that opportunity? He said, well, you got to be a professional lawyer. There's a good job. You got to get a BA and a PhD and an MD. These people will cut your throat in the parking lot because you asked them for a nickel. They run over your kids, they'll back up and run over them again. Dead kid tells no tales in their eyes. Associate members, a.k.a. the lunatics. It's staggering how many of these there actually is. Yeah, I got fascinated. Universities, every time you see university, that's humiliating. When you see radiotherapy center, that's frightening. Their job is to murder you there and in the classrooms and universities and radio shows. Canadian Nuclear Laboratory, Chalk River National Laboratory, owned by the Americans, by the way. These are, this is a list I'll check when I'm doing stories. And if you mention somebody, I'll immediately come over and check and see if their name is on the list. Because I'm a weirdo like that. Institute of Nuclear Non-Medicine. It's frightening every time you see the word medicine and nuclear in the same sentence. It really, a health group. So PhD in a health group is not somebody you can be trusting. Then who are you supposed to trust, right? You don't have an organization you can go to. That should freak you out. How's the poll going? Is putting nuclear dumps under the ocean exceptionally evil? 95% of the people says, yeah. Dana. Duh. Gee, Dana. It's not really a question. Give us a harder question, Dana. I apologize. Medical college. A professor at the medical college is out telling lies about radiation, downplaying it. And these are lies they told many times. It's just a fraction of them. There's a big list. You can't keep up with it anymore. Let's drag it in for something to do then. There's so many of them you can't really. So cosmic radiation, this is like, in order to trick you into thinking the dose you got from a nuclear accident is irrelevant, they'll talk about stuff like this. It's got nothing to do with man-made anthropogenic radiation. We call it man-made because it's not created by the sun. It's not from the solar system. It's completely different. They have no relationship. Cosmic radiation from the sky, terrestrial radiation from the ground, atmospheric sources, mostly radon. Natural radiation in the human body. This is they're gone into Twilight Zone when you include that. Natural radiation, sleeping next to a human for 8 hours. All of these are bigger doses than living next to a nuclear power plant. Living next to a nuclear power plant, living next to a coal-fired power plant. Standing in front of granite at the U.S. Capitol, because granite only exists there, obviously. Flying on an airplane, smoking 30 cigarettes a day. He's Chris Sarkosis or something from the University of British Columbia. Simon Fraser, rather.
And living next to a nuclear power station can actually contribute less than your loved one when it comes to.
So, sleeping next to you wouldn't give you a bigger dose than living next to a nuclear power plant. So why did everybody know they were supposed to laugh at that? Sorry.
When it comes to with
so he got a $6 million grant.
Myself, as one of the principal investigators, was awarded $6 million.
Each year, sustained after Fukushima, to think up, do some experiments to try to come up with so-called medical isotopes, right? Now, he was disclosing that he had to do that because he's getting money from the industry. And he took studies that came out and downplayed them to the point of it's humiliating. We don't have any laws on the planet that would repel them from doing stuff like that, which is pure propaganda, right? Where's Robert Gale to? Now, he cuts people's... Let me put it another way. He does limb and organ transplants, but he does full limb transplants. He irradiates people. So he was in Fukushima talking to the workers, which are the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society. They were asking him how dangerous the radiation was. Smoking 14 cigarettes a day, he said, is more dangerous than working at the nuclear meltdown. Eating 25 cups of peanut butter, spending 20 days in New York, driving 600 kilometers in a car. One of my favorite ones, of course, is kayaking for 15 minutes is more dangerous than being at a nuclear meltdown. And these are outrageous lies, all of them, right? All of them, all of these are outrageous lies. It's horrific. But even just as horrific was the audience knew to laugh. All of them. It's just
and living next to a nuclear power station can actually contribute less than your loved one when it comes to. With myself, as one of the principal investigators, was awarded $6 million.
Just listen to Robert.
And then the final slide will just...
Sorry.
Where on that thermometer does something like Fukushima lie? Now, you'll hear a lot of detailed scientific discussions of our uncertainties.
Kathleen Higley.
That we shouldn't really be talking about point estimates. We should be talking about ranges. But I think what people want to know, what the public want to know, what I have to deal with and when I'm in Tokyo and people ask me, or the workers ask me, what is my risk from getting 50 millisieverts?
Because they're told they're only getting 50 millisieverts. At a nuclear meltdown where multiple reactors detonated. Evil is real. Why is a chiropractor on the list for scientists for accurate radiation? Because I went to university to be a chiropractor when I was young, right? You don't have, you do some radiation, but generally they're the last people you expect. Visiting Professor, Defense Academy, United Kingdom. PhD, MHS. Nuclear Waste Partnership at WIP, another one. We've covered him before. Australian Nuclear Science. Flinders Medical Center. All of these employing incredible... Look at the degrees these people got. Incredible academics. Military Institute of Hygiene. Radiation Effects Association. And here they are on a list of what's known as permanent lawyers. Even scarier, Harvard, Boston Children's Hospital. Lorenz William, a.k.a. Rusty. That should frighten you, that people like that will work. We see this a lot where these professional lawyers work with children because children won't understand the laws, right? It's such a coward thing, eh? But all of them come from certain types of families that have a long history in the nuclear industry, typically. Otherwise, you would know the job exists. University of Medical Science, professional lawyers. The head of radiation is signed on, all come out in law for the nuclear industry. University of Saskatchewan, Waste Isolation Pilot. And that's 3 at the Waste Isolation Pilot Project. Professor of Research, National Radiation Protection Institute. And like Rod Adams and Wade Allison are vicious lawyers. They're vicious lawyers. Nobody in their right mind would be on the same group with them unless they were likewise. Independent consultant to nuclear power safety. Again, radiological health. Again, Loveless Respiratory Research Institute. American radio-labeled chemicals. Look at this one here. Society for Radiation Information, Japan. And the Japan Hormesis Council. Can you imagine there's actually a council out there? When you got 54 nuclear reactors in your country, you need a huge amount of propaganda in case of, and you know you're going to have an event at some point with 54 reactors, right? They were, one thing about Japan, when Fukushima happened, they never missed a beat. They never told the truth a single time. 100% lie after lie. It was really stunning how the nuclear industry worldwide regurgitated the same lies. That's 4 from Loveless Respiratory Research Institute. A teacher, South Technical High, teaching children lies. The Eye Associates of New Mexico. Undersea nuclear waste dumps off Cumbria, which is a nuclear wasteland, would imperil marine life. UK is looking for storage site for the world's biggest stockpile. Which is interesting because United Kingdom is well known for dumping it in the ocean for 3 decades. Yeah, I'll just give you an example of it so you can wrap your mind around it, hopefully. Well, it shocks me. I don't know if it shocks anybody else, but If it doesn't, I don't understand it. And of course, Britain's not the only one, right? They just drive around throwing it off ships all day. When the barrel gets every 33 feet, there's an extra 14 plus pounds per square inch on it, right? So once it gets down a few hundred feet, it's going to implode and hemorrhage radiation, including 100 tons of plutonium. So why would you put it under the... Well, you want, because it's going to melt down. And so the ocean, it'll eventually... It doesn't... That's the thing about a chain reaction. It doesn't need oxygen, right? Because it's a perpetual machine in splitting the atoms. And the atoms are energy. They're pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. And does it for millions of years, unfortunately, right? So when you take it out and put it in the pool, it's still splitting the atom, no containment. So if you put it under the ocean, when it melts down, the ocean will rush into the hole, and that will help cool it down a bit. But that's guaranteed to kill the ocean if the ocean wasn't already contaminated beyond survival. They dumped it in the ocean for 30 years plus. Just go out and drive around in their boats and throw it off the side of the boat. It's really something. So now they're going to do seismic surveys in the Irish Sea near Cumbria, which is hooked up to Sellafield, which used to be called Windscale. And they had a nuclear meltdown in 1957 at a mixed oxide MOX fuel facility. And there's 8 million liters today hemorrhaging into the ocean even today from that meltdown. They spent 70 years making mixed oxide fuel. And you do that by boiling the fuel rods in acid at 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And then you can use techniques to reclaim the hot particles. Now, that's an insidious thing to do because they have been credited with polluting the Arctic, along with La Hague and Degenerate in UK and La Hague in France. The emissions from these places is stunning. And they're so used to being evil, it's normal, say. And they decided they need a big group of people to cover for them because they're prolifically evil. And so all the names I showed you earlier is just a fraction of a percent of the people that... the world has been destroyed by these groups. They're absolute predators, and they run in packs of thousands. Seismic surveys in the Irish Sea near Cumbria will get underway on Saturday to explore whether the area is suitable for a proposed stock facility. So they're just going to sound blast the ocean floor, right? So there's groups now actively criticizing them, which is surprising. For a deep underground repository to store the world's largest stockpile of untreated nuclear waste. We've never ever heard them say, why do you have to put it under the ocean, by the way? Nobody's ever asked that question. It cannot sustainably be stored above ground forever, but why put it under the ocean where it's going to melt down at some point and penetrate the ocean floor? The ocean's going to end up being the repository for these emissions for 1 million years then. Plutonium, which could create thousands of nuclear bombs, cannot be sustainably stored above the ground. Why are they here right now then? And they are therefore searching for a site to keep it safe and secure for hundreds of thousands of years it will take for the radioactivity and natural decay. They don't know because it takes hundreds of thousands of years in theory. They don't know, right? They're going to contaminate everything around it too. Once it breaches, everything will breach. In 2019, radioactivity leaked into the soil beneath Sellafield. In 2019. Like, I'm only laughing or doubting or just exasperated by that. It's hard to understand the complexity of a site that looks like that, right? First off, is hemorrhaging radiation into all those farmer fields. It had Meltdown that we know about. It has pools there that are outdoors. And they don't even know what's in it. It's been there so long. They have a legacy of neglect and just contempt for the oceans and the planet. Like I said, he spent 30 years dumping their nuclear waste in the ocean. Just driving around, throwing it off ships every day for 30 years. So Sellafield wasn't built with decommissioning in mind. It's a good thing because the Decommission Authority has never decommissioned anything in the United Kingdom. There are 20 surface facilities that store highly radioactive waste across the UK. 70 or 20 surface storage facilities. So if you take a Dixie cup, a little teacup of this stuff, and you put it in McDonald's, it'll kill everybody there every 20 minutes for 1 billion years. Also concerned over storing nuclear waste underwater with just a handful of such sites globally. As far as I know, there is no site where they store it under the ocean. So they linked you to this story. U.S. seeks waste research revival. So this was WHIP on the 2014, February the 14th. Valentine's Day, I think it was. Yeah. Radioactive plutonium americium leaked out of the waste isolation pilot plant. It was originally named Waste Isolation Pilot Project. It was just an experiment. It wasn't supposed to be a repository. They got rid of project, put in plant, and kept the word pilot. They're Carlsbad. Now, I put out a video when this happened in 2014. And I explained how the footage we're getting was showing emissions coming out of the site. And that the local community nearby should close his windows and tape up his doors. The local TV station, KRQE I think it was, chopped up my video and ran a clip that was talking about how the radiation lands on your playgrounds and your children's toys and your door handles and everything else. And then call me a crazy conspiracy theorist. They spent $6 billion. They claimed it was a truck fire. And just the back tire on a truck had caught fire. They showed pictures too. And that's why they evacuated it for 10 days. And then when they went back, they found out there was a radiation leak somewhere else on the site, and they had to leave. Now, if you have a truck fire in a spot where you have 55 football field-sized caverns, you're not worried about it, right? If you have a truck tire on the other end of a football field catching fire, you're not really worried about it, right? And so they abandoned it for 10 days. And even today, the central air system, because you need a system It's a very expensive system, apparently, a very big system that pumps air underground. It was incredibly contaminated and we covered it dozens of times. Where finally they brought in a bunch of the experts I showed you earlier, and they said, oh yeah, no, that's okay, you can use that. Radioactive plutonium americium leaked out. It was an actual plume. Under respect to undersea nuclear waste dump off Cumbria would impair the planet. The seismic blasts will cause problems with marine life. It won't cause decompression sickness, though. They've been trying to get the public to think that sonars and whatever is causing the whales to show up emaciated all around the coastline. The whole story is absurd, right? Because you don't want to blame it on radiation. You can blame it on something else. Whales don't get... You get decompression from compressed air. So if you bring compressed air with you and you come up too fast, you get a decompression sickness because the compressed air that is regulated by the scuba, the self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, regulates. It's just a diaphragm that equalizes with the ambient pressure. And so, but if you're coming up, the air you're holding in your lung can expand really quick if you hold your breath. And air can now escape through your lungs into your body. And it expands, and it blocks arteries and stuff like this, right? Or, embolisms and kill you. Which is what happened to me. And yes, it killed me for sure. In a letter the campaigners shared with The Guardian, they're good natured, but they shouldn't say stuff that's not true, that's all. About the decompression illnesses to whales, right? It's simply not true. And noted that the plans, but there was around 5,000 whales and seals and dolphins and everything had washed up in a short period of time in the United Kingdom, which is typically seen as 10%, which meant there was around 50,000 animals that had washed up on the coastline or had died in that area. And one of them was the culvert beak whales. You never see these whales. They're deep water whales. They dive deep and they stay there all day and they come up for a quick breath and straight back down again. And there was around 1,000 of them had showed up, physically been counted. And they were in different stages of decomposition, which meant they had died all recently, but in different times. But at the same time, there was a huge amount of reports of emaciated animals. And in fact, now sometimes you'll see them say, the animal didn't starve to death, it had food in the stomach. And when you look at the picture, the animals are clearly emaciated, right? We got birds washing up all around me everywhere. Thousands of dead birds, gannets and murres and turs. And let me see what we got going on. What's the poll? Where's the poll? Is putting nuclear dumps under the ocean exceptionally evil? And we have over 90% understands that it's evil. Usually when you do stories about the United Kingdom, you'll get the government spammers, the pro-nuke scum spammers. Critics also suggest it may be impossible to predict the consequences of storing heat-generating nuclear waste beneath the sea in perpetuity. These are not critics, these are common sense arguments. These are important arguments on top of that are magically left out of the equation. No matter how effective the barriers, some of the radioactivity will reach the surface. That's the chair of the Nuclear-Free Local Authorities, David Blackburn, who's also the leader of the Green Party. They just ruin everything. That's what they're good at. They're good at ruining, infiltrating, and ruining everything, rather than solving a problem for future generations. Like, putting it under the sea shouldn't be an option. This is absurdness to suggest that putting it under the ocean, drilling under the ocean floor and putting your nuclear waste there, where it's eventually going to melt down and eat through until it gets to the ocean, that's inevitable. However, experts said that this international agreement and benefits of disposing of radioactive waste in deep geological repositories, and that is the most appropriate long-term solution. Well, there's no consensus putting it under the ocean is the best spot. We've never covered any consensus that suggested that. Nobody in their right mind would suggest that, by the way. Which always leads back to nuclear now, doesn't it? The consensus is based on scientific technical work. It's carried out over several decades, extensive research, development, and demonstration programs. Said a paper. I can show you papers that says the moon is square. It is one of the largest environmental protection projects in the United Kingdom. Putting it under the sea is not an environmental protection project at all. It's evil in overdrive. It's silly. Why are we even talking about this? It's craziness. Can't you go find something else to be evil at instead of the most lethal stuff in human history? The Canadian Ontario Pickering nuclear station is closing as planned, despite calls for refurbishment. That's the government's official statement. The Ontario government will not reconsider plans to close the Pickering nuclear station, to stop the closing of the nuclear power station. So when Fukushima melted down, the Canadian government, which is Canadians for Nuclear Energy, which is funded by the Nuclear Power Workers Union. Disgusting. We see this all the time too. These very wealthy organizations will create the so-called opposition, controlled outside entities, and then they fund them. Closing a 50-year-old facility will result in job losses. Yeah, if you close any facility, you're going to get job losses. Wow, that's brilliant. You're so clever. You people shock me. And if you replaced the energy like you were supposed to, you would have created the same number of jobs. You got to close it at some time. Are you going to keep it open forever because people are going to lose their jobs? Is that the new norm now? When it melts down, we'll close it. We covered this story, and I apologize because I know a lot of people are sick of it, but it shows up. Radiant could provide, when you hear the word could, it shouldn't instill confidence because it's nuclear industry, right? First off, portable nuclear energy within the next 5 years to 50, somewhere in between there. It's this SpaceX so-called engineer. Why didn't he continue making rockets? Why did he have to make dirty nuclear? See, and you can't call it zero emissions, you lunatics. You lose so much credibility so quickly, it's shocking, really. Russia woos Africa with arms, grains, and nuclear power. Yeah, Russia's building reactors everywhere. Gonna pay for it. Gonna bring in crews and teach them for a whole decade, and gonna supply the uranium. But why, when you got so many better alternatives? EU lawmakers signed up to 45% renewable targets in response to the Ukraine war. Yeah, which is interesting, really. So they're hoping to get 45% on renewables because of the Ukraine war. The Ukraine war has caused inflation worldwide. No other war has ever done that, right? This little war that NATO was grooming, this little country known as Ukraine. North Korea's nuclear nightmare, former top CIA official reflects on how he got here and what to do about it. Why is North Korea a nuclear nightmare? They're this little country stuck in the middle of nowhere. Land, sea, and air embargoes for almost 70 years. The United Nations killed 3 million of them. The United Nations wounded 3 million of them. The United Nations has kept them in poverty for over 70 years and turned them into a dictatorship. And nobody knows why. They burnt down every house in North Korea, every community, collective punishment. With napalm, they burnt down every home in North Korea, every community, to the ground. And then isolated them from the world for 70 years. They didn't attack anybody. In 70 years, the Americans' military hasn't stopped attacking. The United Nations has never stopped attacking countries. Hundreds of nuclear radiation monitors were hacked by a former repairman. Around 800 of them. Spanish police. It's been going on for quite a time. Hacked all the Geiger counters. Gee, can he do that everywhere else too, Dana? So they show you this picture of the plant in Germany. But actually, if you look it up, that's what it looks like. Surrounded by farms as far as you can see. On a big freshwater river. Everything that washes, every time it rains, a lot of radiation washes into the river right alongside the community. But to have all these farms being polluted, and then the locals are going to be eating that stuff. What a terrible neighbor nuclear is. 800 gamma radiations, which is interesting. They should have neutrons and betas and alpha radiation. For every gamma, you should have 3 other Geiger counters to measure the other emitters. And then you need a 5th one for X-rays, because this stuff pulses energy almost at the speed of light. And the pulses hit each other, they'll change direction. That creates this X-ray. It sterilizes all the insects and larvae and animals and birds on the ground. Apocalypse. New Jersey. What happens if we were hit with a nuclear weapon? Because New York's recently, we covered this, and they were accused of fear-mongering, right? The warning comes as the U.S. and our allies are facing threats from Russia and North Korea. Yeah, North Korea is going to attack New York. That's never going to happen. They're surrounded by nuclear weapons. What's the point? They're just trying to keep people from invading them. They just want to be left alone, like everybody else on the planet. It is believed North Korea leader... It is believed... Well, you didn't call him? Ask him. Is preventing a 7th nuclear test. And of course, you know how I feel about that. Because the radioactive fallout is worldwide. The Americans, the British, and India and Pakistan and China is still carrying out tests underground. It's not illegal for them to carry out tests underground, only in North Korea. The models do not take, and I'd rather it didn't happen ever, because the releases are destroying all species worldwide. The models do not take into account the number of casualties that would result from radioactive fallout, which is really interesting. Why don't the models take in that? Because the people who built the model was at a university. And they were like, oh. People will say, well, we had a nuclear test over there. How bad could it be? It's frightening. Now, if they didn't have it, the radioactive fallout would look like that. Well, first off, radioactive fallout doesn't just blow one direction. It doesn't just disappear for millions of years. And claiming that it's going to make a nice, clean, straight line is ludicrous, because the wind doesn't blow across the country in one direction. It's going to blow in every direction. Does anybody ever see the wind in every community blow in the same direction? You ever hear anything like that in your life? Ain't you sick of the lies? Israel's nuclear program is a serious threat to international security. Now there's a true statement. See the tall, skinny stack at the Dimona nuclear plant? You know what that's for? Venting radiation. UN nuclear conference to start on Monday's Ukraine plant is an alarming state. They're not a watchdog. You can't call the IAEA a watchdog. It's absurd. They're literally the worst type of humans we've come across. They're anti-human. They're anti-life. They're pro-nuclear contamination. Hi everybody. Let's keep it rolling here. Raphael Grossi. I'm just going to keep going because it'll get ugly if I stay there. U.S. regulators will certify the first small nuclear reactor. There's our first glimpse. It looks like it's designed by some schoolboy at graphics class, right? If you believe in New Scale, then you got to hang around here for a couple of shows. We'll beat that out of you pretty quick. Making it just the 7th that has been approved for the U.S. Yeah, but it's not like it's built. It's not like they've got a spot they're going to build it. There's all this posturing, right? This is what we call this stuff, posturing. We're seeing it everywhere. It's just this rhetoric for as long as I can remember anyway. This has been going on. Small modular reactors will avoid many of the problems that made large nuclear plants exceedingly expensive to build. You don't even have one. The initial studies were showing minimum of $3 billion. For something, these are 1/10 the size of a regular reactor. There's no need for it. If you wanted to come up with solutions, you would have, right? You got every university imaginable working on nuclear, but not one of them working on renewables. Many of the small modular designs involve different technologies from traditional reactors, like molten uranium salt. And you can't touch, right? If you introduce water or oxygen, it detonates. Like Santa Susana, which is 460 times worse than 3 Mile Island. Versus what they, like, if they even acknowledge it, they'll say Santa Susana released approximately 460 times more radiation than 3 Mile Island. But the better way to look at it is Santa Susana was equal to 460 3 Mile Islands melting down. Because that's what it was. They built 500,000 homes within 10 miles of ongoing on top of that. The former Rocketdyne site where they set off tens of thousands of rockets with some of the harshest chemicals you can conceive. Every time it rains, you should run if you live in that area. You should just run anyway. They had multiple reactors there with no containments. List is just Westinghouse plants. Now the Westinghouse plant, I missed that, did I? Yeah. Despite water pollution, nuclear spills, South Carolina fuel plant. We covered this thing so many times. And it's always propaganda, just a ridiculous amount of propaganda. Kevin's probably been there, Kevin Blanche. But I covered the stories, right? And so we see this consistent lying from the industry, and we've documented it. Gets a 40-year operation. Now the plant is over, it's 54 years old or something. And they're going to give it a 40-year extension. Now, this is a decrepit facility that makes fuel for nuclear power plants. A fuel factory. Now, if they've had they've had workers wouldn't go there because there's so much uranium fell down through the floorboards. They were bringing in sheets of lead and laying it on the floor because you couldn't. Workers were saying when they first started working there, the Geiger counter would go click, 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 click. Now it's all day long. And they're only counting gammas. Federal regulatory, non-regulatory agencies approved environmental study. Recommended they get a 40-year free pass. They employ 1,000 people. Nuclear industry says they can't survive without them. Neighbors are freaked out by that. They shouldn't even get a 10-year license extension. They're 50-odd years old. That's enough, right? All the local rivers there are just brutally radioactive. The groundwater contamination is not forecast to spread off-site. How are you going to stop aquifers from spreading off-site? It's absurd to suggest it. It's absurd to suggest it. This is what... Why not? Don't they get a real job? It's easy, I guess, to get someone to tell the lie, but... I'm not going to read it all to you because it makes me angry. Where did a smokeroo did that come from? To unsafe levels over 8 years. They were fined them $24,000, which is irrelevant. That's an irrelevant fine, right? After learning uranium had accumulated at an incinerator to unsafe levels over 8 years. They're incinerating uranium at the site. You shouldn't have incinerators at nuclear processing sites, for goodness sakes. Hello? Earth to you. That's frightening. They got incinerators at the site. Uranium had accumulated in an incinerator at unsafe levels. Really? Is anybody really surprised by this at all? Is San Onofre nuclear waste destined for New Mexico? These are vented into the environment on top of that, these casts in the ground. If fully developed, proposed interim storage site could handle all the spent fuel that pile up across the country, but there's opposition. Is a solution to decades-long debated over what to do with the nuclear waste of San Onofre? The Nuclear Regulatory Commission issued a final environmental impact statement and recommended granting the licenses. That's what they do. They got a big rubber stamp. Get it out of here. In fact, they just send out the rubber stamp to the companies that are going to ask them. Let them rubber stamp it on their own. Just give us a call once in a while. Invite us to your children's birthdays. In conjunction with energy and nuclear company Chris Sings, Holtec. He's the president, the secretary, the busboy, fucking janitor, excuse the language. San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station, known as SONGS, has not produced electricity since a leak in a steam generator around 2012 led to its closing. It's in the process of being dismantled. And how's everybody doing here? We have 53 votes. Is putting nuclear dumps under the ocean exceptionally evil? Is there any other way, Dana? Well, it's the nuclear. I'm trying to be... never mind. It's just nuclear. Let me go back there, Dana. 3.5 million pounds of radioactive fuel rods. If you took a pound of it to your local subway station, everybody who walked past it that day will die. And the next day and every day for millions of years, a single pound of this stuff. Astonishing footage shows a nuclear bomb being tested underwater. The Marshall Islands, where there's over 1 million square kilometers polluted. Now, the sulfur from the salt water had this bizarre effect where it gathered up hot particles and gave them this extra energy in this spherical ball known as sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. And this stuff is very mobile for a very long... Well, each atom is like a little nuclear engine. It's pulsing energy every second. So it's like a little engine, right? It's a very, 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 very terrible thing to let loose on a planet. Even though the bomb was 500 feet underwater when it detonated, the blast was so powerful that after effects could be seen for 3.5 minutes. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, on these incredible, beautiful, magical paradises, and they go out and blow them up with nuclear weapons and make them radioactive. The Bravo bomb was equal to 1,000 times more powerful than Hiroshima. Over 5,000 square miles was considered a lethal dose. Luckily for the entire species, the last of those bombs were dismantled in 2011. Lucky for the species. Listen, once you released radiation to an environment, luck is not helping anything. There's no way the planet can survive, so we got to try to mitigate it a bit. Nuclear Non-Regulatory Commission recommends renewal of Westinghouse. Yeah, everybody's shocked, are they? No nukes for life and for the planet. Should be no nuclear power plants because you can't have nuclear weapons without nuclear power plants. Anti-nuclear protests at the U.S. mission to Scumbag, Degenerate in the United Nations. Human trash United Nations. What they done is just shocking to the planet. It's 195 misery military machines. In 1982, 1 million people marched and rallied in New York, demanding an end to nuclear weapons, nuclear war. 1,700 arrested, civil disobedience, outside the UN mission of the 7 nuclear states. So, You see the United Nations in movies all the time. It's in radio all the time. And they all call them the authority, right? In other words, you don't have sovereignty. It's been snuck away from you by this idiot machine known as the military-industrial complex. Some people call them United Nations. Authority to sell depleted uranium could help the Department of Energy's nuclear cleanup. I'm not laughing. I'm trying not to scream. So instead of cleaning up the nuclear waste, you want to sell it. I can save a few $1 billion. Department of Energy must clean up the nuclear waste left behind at 2 former uranium enrichment sites. One of them by New York, I guess. Department of Energy estimates it could cost at least $7.2 billion to convert and dispose of the uranium. The Department of Energy can transfer portions of the inventories, such as selling some to private companies. It could save billions. These private companies are insiders, right? There's no checks and balances, period. There's no incentive not to be evil. However, a review by the government watchdog found it currently unclear if the Department of had authority to sell the depleted uranium. They got other options. Only one site is licensed to receive it, which is WIP. And they're waiting for funding to begin the disposal process. Hanford needs another $700 billion or something, almost $1 trillion. Do you really think they're going to solve that with a lousy 1,585 square mile dump? UK Gemini waste packages re-enter service. This is from World Nuclear News. So I apologize. You can get a shower after. The first active shipment of legacy waste drums from the Magnox Hardwell in Oxfordshire, England. It's been sitting there puking out isotopes for decades. We've shipped to the nuclear wasteland in Cumbria known as Sellafield. Sellafield. Used to be called Windscale, but they changed the name after crimes against humanity. Had been completed using the non-decommission authorities. Listen, calling the nuclear decommission authorities, the nuclear decommissioning group, I should say, authorities, that should be a crime. It's probably, if you're not familiar with the United Kingdom Decommission Authority, to call them authorities is just absurd. It's really, that's absurd. What is the Manhattan Project? And Robert J. Oppenheimer's nuclear research explored. These are the actors. Ernest Teller and Edward Teller and Ernest Lawrence. Teller, Lawrence, and Oppenheimer. Their legacy is just horrific. Oppenheimer became anti-nuclear. He was, I would say chastised, but it was much worse than that. He was chased out of his position by the scum in the industry. They really are a loathsome bunch. The problem is U.S. climate agenda. Biden seeks emancipation in nuclear power. And the nuclear industry like, oh no you don't. Nuclear power supplies 10% of the world's electricity. Such advertisements are currently booming in the United States. It's not advertisement, it's propaganda, right? The sheer of nuclear power in the energy mix must increase in order to meet Biden's government ambitious climate goals. So the so-called climate goal, which we've been covering forever, it feels like, was about promoting nuclear, right? That's what a climate scientist's job is. The solution to all climate is nuclear. That's what they're taught in university. Then they get in a job and you can't get rid of them again, right? James Hansen is one of those. This is how the nuclear industry writes it in politics. Half of America's clean, zero-emission energy comes from nuclear power. All nuclear power plants are dirty. They're the most dirty energy on the planet. Each nuclear power plant needs at least 2 gas, oil, or coal plants to operate 24 hours a day, dedicated. The zero-emission propaganda waves torture. Nuclear power when the sun don't shine. That's why you have storage. If you had wind and solar on one side of the planet, wind and solar on the other side of the planet, so you're always catching the sun, that should solve your energy problem. If you can run fiber optics, you can run the rest of it too, right? Nuclear power plants can step in whenever there's a silence or the sun doesn't shine. So, like, Ontario, Canada had 700 wind farms, and they got rid of them because they wanted nuclear to be the dominant power last year. They just cut them off like that, right out of the blue. And then they decided to give the nuclear industry all kinds of money. One of them was a pumped hydro, what they call water batteries, basically, where you got a pond up high and a pond down low. And so when you got excess energy, you pump the water up the hill. When you need it at nighttime, the water flows down the hill, right? So excess energy pumps water up the hill to another pond. Just recirculate all the time. Again, they always talk about football fields and stadium. So if all the nuclear waste that has been accumulated in the United States could be accommodated in a football field, why does WIP have 55 football field-sized caverns? Well, first off, you can't put it all in the same spot, Dana. Second off, if you put all that in the same spot, it would detonate. Deal stuck to bring Japan's nuclear waste to Cumbria in 1968. Now they're going to take it and dig a hole under the ocean, put it out there. Because that's what evil does, man. It probably doesn't even know it's evil. See, it's the scary thing about this. These are fishing ships that they re-outfitted to bring nuclear waste in. So, that's a fishing ship. I'm not worried about that. I don't care about that. So they disguise the nuclear waste as fishing ships to sneak it into your countries, right? It'll be processed at wind scale for recovery of valuable residual content. Residual. This was an old story. I don't know why it showed up. The cargo boat was called Living Fisher, specially fitted out for the task. Looks like a fishing boat, carries nuclear waste. CMP in India opposes the power plant they're building. You gotta be careful down there, you get shot down there. For the safety of the people in the North Coast District, they should stop the nuclear power plant. That's a moral, ethical, proper decision. The Earth is earthquake prone and not suitable for the establishment of nuclear. stating that all developed countries have closed nuclear power plants as they are very dangerous for the safety of the public. You go, buddy. You go, man. Awesome. Get them back. Hit them back. A new EIA report underscores the rapid growth of renewable energies, led by solar and wind. Use of solar energy rose by 27% and wind by almost 25%. Mutual agreement to stop exploding nuclear weapons. I got no idea what that was all about. I lost the will to live along about that point. Nobody knows. I don't even know what this story is. Oh, that's the tanks. Those tanks are empty. I know there's people who think there's something in the tanks. There's not. If you fill up the tanks, you're talking about 1.4 million sieverts. Let me be very clear about this. You can't build another tank. You can't do it. You can't work near the tank or anything else. The tanks are empty. They were built to trick you and manipulate you and deceive you into thinking they didn't kill the Pacific Ocean. This is France's model of the radioactive fallout, killing the planet in just 16 days. And it's only based upon venting, it's not based upon the actual nuclear meltdowns inventories. We got 54 votes. 93% says putting nuclear dumps under the ocean is exceptionally evil. And can you blame them, really? Southern Ops cost estimate, now Earl's timing of the Georgia's Vol nuclear plant. A bit. They've been doing a bit every day for years. It's already billions of dollars over budget and decade behind schedule. They're the only nuclear power plants under construction in the United States. So if nuclear was important to the nuclear industry, they'd be building nuclear power plants everywhere, right? Well, they're not. And they haven't been. Nuclear energy has a new appeal as the climate pressure mounts. Again, this is anything to promote nuclear. Anything. We must aim to prevent the closures of any and all nuclear power plants that can't be licensed to continue operation. The problem is that all the fuel pools worldwide are also doing this to us. Looks at nuclear cogeneration. Nuclear energy is an important source of low carbon electricity, says the crazies. Again, this is madness. Right? You put them in an office and give them free booze and put them around a table. Still don't make them right. Nuclear innovation is key to American economic futures. This is the hill. Like this lot there, that's the last ones you want for a neighbor. Energy prices continue to soar because Americans wouldn't take Russia's fuel all of a sudden. Don't worry about greenhouse gas. Well, greenhouse gas is the cover story for radiation. This is radiation. This is a 19-day model. Radiation covers the entire planet. Can't call it emission-free. That's a lie. No, that's a lie. Not carbon-free, you lunatics. Crazy don't make better. FC Group pushes for extending life of Ontario nuclear facility, which we covered earlier. They're not closing it. I'm sorry, they're closing it. Disease factory. Scary. Those parents should be arrested for child abuse, bringing their children to the beach alongside a nuclear power plant. That's child abuse. Emission free. They're crazies, eh? That's all we seem to get. The Guardian view on nuclear warfare. Increased risk of accidental nuclear war. Kim Jong-un says he's ready to use nuclear weapons. The Americans don't leave him alone. I thought we covered that one. Yeah, we did cover those couple, didn't we? And that one. And that one. Oh. We're finished. We're finished. Oh, I see we are so. I'm going to go down to the end of it so I can get rid of it. Perfect. Oh me, oh my. That makes me feel a bit better. That makes me feel a bit better. Hang on here. Yipper, man. We got the wheel bearing put on Friday, and my upper control arm is so bad. That's not it. My upper control arm ball joint, you got to do the whole thing. Is when you put the bar underneath, the ball joint came up about that much. He says you can't drive it, man. If you drive it, you're going to get hurt or hurt somebody else. So he wants $480 locally for it. And I said, well, I can't do that. And I found it on Amazon, $180 or whatever it was, and ordered it on Friday. So who knows how long that's going to take to show up. That's pretty... That shocked my system. That means I'm shut down until another 2 weeks probably. So demoralizing for sure, because we're supposed to be out doing research expeditions, right? Because the world, I don't have a big enough following. The world doesn't know the danger we're in. We can't fund the operation, right? It's been happening more and more, and all I can do is the best I can do. We got mass bird die-offs happening down there as we're talking each day. It's got me tortured. Maybe I'll cover that tomorrow night, but I'd like to thank everybody for showing up. Organic Slant sent $25, and James Lucid donated $123, and so that paid for the new part and plus the labor on Friday. Blah blah blah. But we're in good spirit. We'll keep trying the best we can to tell the story, cover the information, provide the documentation, do the real human thing, right? Okay, well, Let's close the poll down, I suppose. Is putting nuclear waste, nuclear dumps for fuel under the ocean exceptionally evil? They won't tell us why they want to put it under the ocean. They have no explanation. In history, we've never heard them. We've heard this from a few countries recently in the last couple of years. When the United Kingdom's going to do something, they always seem to pick what's the most evil thing to do here. Okay, let's do that. That's what they might have 5 evil ways to go. Well, putting it under the ocean, that's evil, man. Okay, well, let's do that then. That's about the only reason I can come up with, because nothing else makes sense. And I mean that sincerely, nothing else makes sense. They won't explain why putting it under the ocean is such a great idea, because obviously it's not. And so give us a thumbs up if you think about it. I'm not going to bite you. I'm not going to bite anybody. Timber, thank you. James Lucid. Just a headline that faded into the many, many memory holes. Yeah, it's terrifying, isn't it? Richard. Dana Nasana. Hi, Dana. Yeah, there's a fault under Diablo. Michael Allport. Good night, everybody. John Curtis. Albert. How you doing, Albert? Invisible Rabbit. Peace where John Curtis. Kevin Blanche. Christopher, a thinker, Nancy, Victor, I was really sick yesterday and this morning, all night actually. I'm definitely off tonight. Snakes and doggies, hopefully they're coming around tomorrow. Just burnt out. We can't get anything to work. Everything is breaking. Can't get anything accomplished. And I like doing things, right? John Shiflett. I'm struggling, and that's okay. It's normal, unfortunately. It's not right, but history will not like that when you look back. Dale P. Thinker. I'm probably going to miss a few people. Another Gmail. Don Vincent. Colette is out there. Sandra Churchill. Peace where Chelsea. Hi, Chelsea. Stephen Young. Hi, Stephen. I'm glad you're there, buddy. It's good to see you, man. Worried about you. Haven't heard from you. Let's call her a night, folks. Andrew B. Organic Slant. Kent Anderson says they're running support nuclear power ads on YouTube. Oh my God. That's terrifying. Let's close the poll down. 59 votes pro-nuclear actually voted 7%. Wow. 59 votes, 93% said nuclear is a scumbag. Pretty hard to argue with common sense. From Joan Moore. No, we haven't heard from Joan Moore for quite a while, have we? Also known as Giant. I was thinking that, not that, a few days back. He's had a rough go, that poor guy. Looks like I got most people this time. I always miss a few. Colette S is out there. Good night. Organic slant. Thank you. Swanee D is out there somewhere. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. I got one packaged and ready to go for tomorrow night. I'll be working on the next one tomorrow when I wake up. Or when I go in a few minutes. Whatever comes first. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. See everybody. Have a good one.